So today what I want to talk to you about is how you can learn to thrive as a tech-savvy lawyer. So what I think everyone's probably learned at this conference is technology is here to stay, and more, it's just become table stakes. So how can you strategically incorporate it in your practice? And how can you use it as a competitive advantage against peer firms as well as larger law firms? So talk a little bit about quick introduction, how modern web technology works, so you can start thinking about how to start leveraging different platforms, different APIs in your practice. The value of legal tech today and some basic concepts of legal tech, what's out there, how you can implement it, and ultimately how you're going to thrive as a tech-savvy lawyer. And of course, we're all attorneys, so we do have to think a little bit about the ethical considerations and how to properly select a vendor. Quickly, my background is I'm an attorney by trade, started my legal career at Kirkland & Ellis, and about 3 years ago left, learned some computer programming, and built this company called Alt Legal. We help companies and law firms create and track IP filings in a very automated way, so without any real manual effort associated with it. So I think everyone's probably familiar with this slide. You're probably bombarded all day long with different technology pitches, seeing a lot of vendors, trying to get technology to work with your workflow. Cleo's even got a support desk here to help, but it's a double-edged sword. So how do you really get it to work the way that you want? And the use of technology in law isn't anything new. It's just now you're seeing more vendors out there, right? We saw the adoption of typewriters in the late 19th century. Personal computers emerged in the 1950s, and then personal computers in its current form in the 1980s. Email started being adopted by the legal industry in the late 90s. Now we've seen cloud-based software really take off, and that's doubled in adoption in recent years. But, and kind of taking back to what Jack was speaking about in his keynote, I think the next iteration of technology is really going to be around automation and using data and making data-driven decisions for your practice. And so we'll talk about how you can really use this and take it to your own personal practice here. So good dichotomy here between traditional law practices and modern law practices, and this divide is just increasing. So when you look at traditional law practices, aside from being more paper-based, most of their technology is largely outdated. They're only thinking about technology from an information standpoint. So they use it for legal research. They access tools like Westlaw, or they use it as a document management system, but they're not thinking about automation as much. They're not thinking about data. And this is where I think smaller law firms and boutique practices can really use this as an advantage. And of course, look at a modern law practice. They're much more agile. Their case files, their invoices, their documents can be accessed from anywhere. They're largely cloud-based, and they use technology to be more efficient, more nimble, more agile. And these firms tend to do a lot more with less because they rely on virtual assistants. They rely on automation with software. And they even rely on the freelance economy. So for example, there's tools that will let you hire contract attorneys on demand whenever you need them, all from a website. And in fact, I was speaking to someone last night who was showing me her entire law practice on her phone. She pulled up a folder on her iPhone and said, with these 4 apps, I can run my law practice anywhere. And you can't really imagine a large law firm doing that today. So why is legal tech relevant? It's going to make practicing law easier. And it's also going to start giving you a competitive edge as this becomes much more of a competitive practice area. So let's talk a little bit about modern web technology. So how do modern websites and apps work? So you're a user, you have a computer or you have an iPhone app. You're going to request something, you're going to touch a button, you're going to click. And what's going to happen is that data is going to be sent to a server, which is essentially a computer stored somewhere. It's going to either deliver that data back to you, or it's going to process it in some way and ultimately give this back to you. And then your computer will analyze it and display it on your screen, or your iPhone will. But that all leads to cloud-based software today, and I think that most people in this room now are probably familiar with that, being at Clio Cloud Conference. But It's essentially, it's going to give you access anywhere. It's data stored in the cloud. And what is merged is these models called SaaS models, software as a service, where you pay a monthly subscription fee, and it takes away from that traditional model where you would go to a store, buy a CD-ROM, pay a one-time fee, and you get that version. Instead, you build this ongoing relationship with your vendor. And that allows them to receive monthly subscription fees. You get the latest version, and oftentimes you also get support with these services. And it's minimal setup. You're instantly up and running. For many of these vendors, including the ones out there, just plug in your email address, your password, and you're instantly up and running with the software. And of course, good contrast here is between what Google Docs offers today and traditional versions of Microsoft Office. But the reason I'm highlighting all this is because I really want to show you the power of APIs today. So APIs stand for Application Program Interfaces. And with APIs is essentially a layer that allows two computer programs to talk to each other. Essentially a glue that allows two applications to work together. As an example, in the legal context, if you want information about your trademark filing, you're going to go over to the USPTO's website, you're going to access it. Instead, vendors like my company can automatically, through an API that's provided by the US government, retrieve information about your trademark and send you an email alert without you having to navigate that government website. And as you start thinking about your practice today, your data is across platforms. You have something for email. You have something for practice management today. You have something for your billing. You use QuickBooks. And the last thing you want to do is log something in QuickBooks, then go over to Clio, log it again, and then go back into your email and then do something else. When you start thinking about APIs, you can get these programs to talk to each other for you. And when you start doing that, you can automate workflows in a way that would otherwise have just taken you manual time that compounds to hours a week. And so one of the tools out there, and I think I see a gentleman here wearing a ZAPIER cert, is an online service that allows information to be moved from one web application to another. So basically, companies like Clio, QuickBooks, Google Docs, all connect to ZAPIER. And then ZAPIER will build automated workflows that will take information from Google and send it over to Clio. It will take information from QuickBooks and send it over to Clio and vice versa. And all this is based on this basic computer programming concept called if this, then that, where it's essentially a trigger. If this event happens, then take this action. And so as an example, if I wanted to create a ZAPIER recipe such that every time I get an email, I tag it with a label that says DMCA notice, I can have it automatically add a new matter and create a new task for me to follow up 30 days later in Clio or any other calendar tool or whatever it is. As a basic example, you could even set up something that says, if the weather forecast says it's going to rain, send me a text message to bring an umbrella. But when you start using tools like ZAPIER, you're going to be able to automate a lot of workflows, and we'll talk about strategies on how to think about that in a little bit. So one of the more interesting use cases of APIs is a government API out of New Zealand. And this is probably at the forefront of APIs in government offices, and probably where I see the future headed for government APIs. This is one that actually works incredibly well. And what it allows me to do is submit a trademark application from beginning to end with my contacts, client's information, specimens, everything, without ever visiting the New Zealand office website. So I don't have to navigate clunky government websites to get information into an application. And so you can imagine a workflow with all the technology that's out there where you could do online intake. That online intake sends you an email. You look at what your client filled out about a trademark application. You can make edits in line. You reply to an email address that you've set up, and that will send out an entire application to the New Zealand IP office without you having to go through one government form and copy and paste and figure out where your notes were on that file. It's all automated. And this will allow for so much greater efficiency and accuracy when other government offices introduce tools like this. So let's talk about what's happening in legal tech today and how you should be thinking about your practice. So I don't think these stats should be a surprise to anyone in this room or really anyone at this conference. But 85% of law firms recently surveyed maintained or increased their technology budget. 62% cited the versatility and mobility of cloud-based solutions as the most compelling reason to go to a cloud. And the number of lawyers using cloud-based software has doubled in the last 4 years. And this is all to say, eventually, you hear a lot about, AI replacing lawyers and all of that, and there's an element of truth to that. But what is really going to happen is you're going to have this increasingly competitive world in your legal practice because everyone's using technology. Everyone's thinking about automation. Everyone's thinking about data-driven approaches and decisions. So it's time to get ahead of that curve. So I'm not going to talk too much about practice management solutions. I think everyone probably knows what that is here. But a lot of new tools out there, billing software you could use in your practice. QuickBooks is the obvious one, but there's Harvest and ViewBill, which I'll highlight in a second, is a personal favorite for creating transparency with clients. And there's legal marketplaces that you could use to become more agile as a practitioner. So hire Esquire, for example. If you need contract attorneys, all of a sudden you can have a vetted marketplace that will handle the 1099 for you and give you contract attorneys on demand. So if you get a big litigation case as a boutique practitioner, you can quickly ramp up. And then on the flip side are marketplaces that are geared towards helping you build your practice. So they connect small businesses, individuals, entrepreneurs with attorneys that need them. So those are Priori Legal and UpCounsel. And as you start thinking about, again, ways to incorporate technology, document assembly. So Clio has some tools around this, I think. There's a few others that provide crude document assembly, but if you need something that's much more involved, and you find yourself recreating the same document, even if it's taking you 15 minutes, invest in one of these providers. There's Contract Express, HotDocs, JurisDoc, which is a newer provider. And what you could do is set up workflows that say, create this template, I'm going to input this information, fill out the name in these 5 sections so that I don't have to recreate the wheel every time I'm creating a document. And all these times, all these little administrative tasks do add up. There's new legal research providers today in the market. So Casetext is one of the newer ones. They released a really cool tool called Cura. And what you do with Cura, for example, is you'll upload a brief, and Casetext's software will analyze the brief to find other cases that you could have cited or that they've seen other practitioners or other legal documents cite. There's also Fastcase, which is exhibiting out there, and Ravel. So beyond the Westlaw and LexisNexis out in the space. And then the last part of legal technology that you probably want to look at in your practice is specialized practitioner software. So if you're a litigator, there's Allegory Law. There's FactBox, which I think is one of Clio's newest integrations that they announced. Blue Dot, which handles immigration. If you're a bankruptcy lawyer, look at Next Chapter. So when you start looking at where to incorporate technology in your practice, start looking at specialized software. What is out there for my specific practice area that I can incorporate into my practice? So what's really the value of legal tech? And I mentioned a little bit, it's around really enhancing efficiency. But again, it's going to become an increasingly more competitive practice today, and that's where legal tech's really going to separate you from the competition. And one of our customers actually told me something a couple years ago that really stood out when we were doing customer testimonials. And he said, the challenges of a small law firm are probably the same for everybody. Whether you're a lawyer, or you have a flower shop, or you run a consulting agency, you essentially have to do everything. And I think many solo practitioners and boutique practices will attest to this. You're not only responsible for the legal work, but you have the accounting, the invoicing, the marketing, and then finally you get to do a little bit of legal work. And Jack spoke about this, I think, in his keynote, where he showed that small law practices, particularly solos, are billing out at 2 or 3 hours a day, and the rest of the day is spent on administrative tasks like this. And this is where legal tech can enhance that and give you more time to focus on substantive legal work. So again, where do lawyers see legal technology today? They see it as a key factor in their firm's success. So 73% of lawyers agreed with that. 86 say they actually prioritize efficiency in their practice. And 86% of law firms said that technology tools and solutions can actually help them be more efficient. So your peers are already thinking this way, and really, again, back to that point, it's going to become more competitive as more law firms apply and adopt technology. And one of the ways that technology can help you, and the billable hour has been there for long, and I'm not one of those people that says, don't ever bill by the hour. It should only be fixed fee. But more lawyers should start thinking about how they can sell margins instead of hours. How can you become more profitable if you can structure fixed fee transactions in a way that actually makes sense? So I think many of us have been taught for the longest time to bill by the hour. But with technology, you can really eliminate administrative workflows, repetitive workflows, to make legal transactions more profitable. And really what you want to focus on when you think about this is predictability. Are there elements of this legal transaction that are inherently predictable? And that's not true with litigation as much, but with transactional work, there's a lot more opportunities for that. So let's take an example of two trademark lawyers. One charges a fixed fee, and the other one charges hourly. And so with Jamie, she's learned to charge $500 for a trademark filing as a fixed fee. She uses technology to do the intake. She uses technology to automatically create the trademark filing. And with that, she's able to accomplish a trademark filing in less than an hour. Take Jordan, though, in contrast. Jordan's billing by the hour. He's not going to bill 2 hours for this transaction if it takes him 1. He uses the same technology, but his effective billable rate is $200 less than Jamie's because he's still billing by the hour. So when you find legal transactions that lend themselves to this, certainly use it to your advantage and use it to sell margins, not hours. How else can legal technology help you? It can create a better experience for your client. It can enhance transparency. So this was one of the billing tools I mentioned earlier, View a Bill. And with cloud-based software, this is possible because you can both be accessing the same data. So what View a Bill does, it requires attorneys to log their time. It also gives the client that they're billing access so that the client can log in and see the status of their bill at any given time. Complete transparency into the billing process. And I'll give you an example. One of our customers had this fortunate or unfortunate situation where she had such a busy year, she forgot to bill one of her clients for the entire year. Good situation to be in. But it amounted to over $10,000 of legal fees that she now had to call her client and say, hey, by the way, I forgot, you owe me $10,000 now. A tool like View a Bill would have given that discipline and transparency so the client could have been seeing that bill along the way, and she could have automated it so View a Bill would send a monthly invoice to that client and not be in this unfortunate situation of calling the client and saying, $10,000 now. And so that's where this helps. And then the other point of legal tech where I think there's opportunity for more transparency is with online intake forms. Certainly recommend that everyone start leveraging them in their practice because it's a collaboration tool. You can send your client an intake form, they can complete it, but you also have complete visibility into what they're filling out. And later, in case your client does something where they say, I never said this, I never filled that out, you have that paper trail, digital paper trail. So that's where legal tech can also help you. And then the last is reducing risk. So one of the key sources of malpractice in the US today is missed deadlines, docketing errors. And legal tech can be used for automation this way, where you could teach software to say, if X event happens, create this deadline for me. And so this is where docketing software can help. And in fact, some malpractice providers even require you to have docketing software today. And ultimately, legal tech is really, I think, a competitive tool. Use it in your toolbox, just like anything else. Use it to be more nimble, more agile than the larger firms, and use it as a way to compete with your peers in a more effective way. Technology is here to stay. Even clients are expecting you to use some technology. One of our customers actually on his website has an area where he highlights his legal tech toolkit. He's trying to project himself as a tech-savvy lawyer, so he just says, here's all the technology I use. This allows me to keep your legal fees even lower, and this is why you should trust me as opposed to some other practitioner. So, told you a lot about all the legal tech out there, the advantages of it, but how do you go about thinking on how to strategically implement it in your practice? It doesn't make sense for every transaction, it doesn't make sense for every component, but where does it actually work for you? So let's talk about a little bit about that. When you look at a legal transaction, break it down into its core components. And I think this applies for most legal transactions. You get an initial inquiry from a client. You're going to do some phone calls. You're going to exchange some emails to assess their legal need. You're going to collect specific information, some intake, whatever that may be, or they're going to come in for a meeting. You're going to jot down some notes. You'll review that. You'll do some issue spotting like we were all taught in law school. You'll follow up with the client to get more information. And then eventually you'll prepare some sort of legal document to complete the legal transaction, or you'll file something with the court. But what you want to do is break each of these components into core steps and analyze each of the tasks and say what parts are substantive, what parts are repetitive, and what parts are administrative. So let's go over each one of those. Now, substantive tasks, in my view, are the ones that require legal interpretation and critical thinking skills. This is why we all went to law school. The repetitive tasks are ones that are just brute force. If this email has this label, create a new matter. Those are repetitive in nature, and those are perfectly primed for automation and legal tech. And then there's administrative tasks. Now, these don't require the legal element, the legal substantive skills, but they do require some level of minimal interpretation. And so they can't be automated entirely. And when you start taking your legal workflow and you break your legal transaction, map it out. Here are all the steps I take, and here are all the sub-steps I take. And within that, break it into substantive, repetitive, and administrative. You're going to get a lot of efficiency by then trying to plug in legal technology that fills that gap in your practice. And so, again, you could see where ZAPIER could fit into this. You could build automated workflows, trying to figure out where those tasks are administrative or repetitive again, and really provide a lot of efficiency to your practice. So now that you've identified some sort of strategic workflow, you know what technology tools are out there, how do you become a more tech-savvy lawyer? You all are here, which is the right step. But what else? So there's practice-specific communities. And this is where, if you're going to be adopting practice-specific software, who better to help you vet these vendors and learn best practices than your peers? Join these groups like American Intellectual Property Association if you're a patent lawyer. If you're an immigration lawyer, American Immigration Lawyers Association, or INTA, International Trademark Association, if you're a trademark attorney. Be part of general legal communities. So there's actually a new group that came out, I think, about a year or two ago called Evolve Law. And what Evolve Law has done is aggregated all the legal technology providers out there. They put them into what they call Legal Tech Toolkit, and then they organize events all around the country where they talk about how attorneys should be thinking about and adopting technology. Be part of your local bar associations. Be part of the ABA. They're all starting to create content around what technology should you be using in your practice. Be part of online legal communities. So for example, I think Clio has a user forum on LinkedIn. Many solos will know Solo Says and all the exchange on there in terms of technology. And then last is webinars. Find webinars on legal technology that you can use to stay ahead. And in fact, you're starting to see even some of an ethical shift towards competence being associated with tech savviness, and we'll talk about that towards the end as well. Blogs. There's a lot of them out there. If you don't know Bob Ambrogi, he's got a blog, he's here. He reviews legal tech vendors continuously so you can find new technology. Go to Lawyerist. They talk about legal technology as well. And then the simplest and easiest way is go on Twitter. follow legal tech thought leaders, follow Evolve Law, see what they're talking about, see what Clio's talking about, what is out there that you should be adopting in your practice, because there's never been more legal technology startups than ever before than there are today. So let's talk about ethics. There's a lot of legal technology vendors that are continuously pushing content at you, trying to get you to adopt their software. What are the ethical considerations around this? So Rule 1.1 is around competence. And it's essentially you have to provide competent representation to your client, and that requires legal knowledge, skill, thoroughness, and preparation. But what 23 states have done recently is adopt Comment 8. It's to say that not only do you have to keep doing CLEs and everything else, but you need to know the benefits and risks associated with relevant technology. And so I'm not sure if this has been tested yet, but I could imagine certainly a case where you miss something, you make a mistake. Could the client argue that you didn't comply with this rule because you didn't stay ahead of all of the technology, you didn't adopt the best practices today? And could that then be a source of malpractice? Again, 23 states have adopted it. We're seeing more and more states adopt this comment, and I think that's certainly a trend here that's to stay. What are the other ethical considerations to keep in mind? Rule 1.6, which is the duty of confidentiality. Are you doing enough to safeguard your client's information against some sort of unauthorized breach? So when you look at a legal technology vendor, part of your diligence has to be, what do they do to protect against an unauthorized breach? Then there's also Rule 1.15 and 1.16D, which is around safeguarding property. What are these legal tech vendors, especially the ones that are going in the cloud, doing when they store your client's confidential information? How are they protecting it? Do they have it stored securely? Is it transmitted securely? And then 1.16D in particular talks about what happens when you terminate the representation with a client. And so what that says is, upon termination of representation, a lawyer should take the steps reasonably necessary to protect their client's interest. So if you're using cloud-based software and you do end a relationship with a client, how do you ensure that they're deleting that file? How do you ensure that their information is destroyed the way that your client wants? And then the last one to consider is 5.3. It's responsibilities around non-lawyer assistance. Does this apply when you really adopt legal technology? Do you have to do the same diligence and watch over in the same way that you would over a paralegal or assistant? And the other thing to look at that's not on this slide is a lot of states have adopted cloud ethical opinions around what minimum requirements should be in your state. The ABA's got a list of them, so if you just Google that through the ABA, you'll find it. But generally, they want 3 different things. One, they want to ensure that the provider has an enforceable obligation to preserve the confidentiality and security. And they're going to provide you with notice if they get served where somehow your client's information needs to go out there. And you want to investigate the provider's security measures. So again, are they storing it securely? Are they transmitting it securely? Who has access to data? When do they have access to it? And then you want to make sure that they have at least some safeguards to protect against reasonably foreseeable attempts to infiltrate the data. All right, so now we're done with ethics. And how else do you go about considering it? Beyond the ethical issues that you have and ethical duties, what else should you be asking these legal tech vendors when you do investigate? So security is first. Is the data securely stored? Is it securely transmitted? And then who at each company has access to the data? Where about the servers? Where are they located? Are they stored in a secure facility? Are they hosted on AWS, Amazon Web Services? Are they stored on Microsoft Azure? Are they in Europe? What laws apply to those servers and where they are? Now, what about accessibility and exportability? how easy is it to get your data out? Let's say you want to fire that vendor. What can you do? Do they have any obligation in terms of service to provide you with that data? Or do you simply download it, or are you out of luck? And going back to 1.16d, how is data removed? What about if you terminate the service generally, or if you need to just delete the files for one client? And then financial stability. So there's a lot of innovation in legal tech today. You're going to see a lot of legal tech vendors, and a lot of them are just bootstrap companies. So how stable is the company? Are they going to go bankrupt tomorrow? Again, that goes back to data accessibility. Do you have any obligation, or do they have any obligation to give you that data? And so it doesn't mean that if there's a new vendor, you can't use them. You just have to use them with that safeguard in mind. Terms and transparency. So what do the terms of service say? And I'm not even sure how many of our customers have actually read our terms of service, but you need to be looking at it. What does the privacy policy say? And as attorneys, it's funny, but so many people gloss over that. And the credibility of the company. So again, there's a lot of innovation in legal tech, but who's behind the company? Just simply Google their names, see what comes up before you trust them with all of your clients' data and all of your practice. Customer support. Is it easy to get a hold of them? How do you get a hold of them? Do they have live chat support? Do they have phone support? What are their hours? Do they outsource that? And then really around who's going to be handling your data. Do they have any contractors? Do they have third parties? Who has truly access to your client data, and where is the web development being done? And then lastly, it's really around legal recourse. So what happens if there's a breach of security? Are they going to notify you? Do they have any obligation to notify you? And this is where, again, you want to do the diligence on their terms of service. And then last question to really ask them is, how often do you update your security protocols? When was the last time you made a change around this? Do you audit anything? Do you have a third party that vets your site? Do you have any sort of firewall? What protection do you have? So around legal tech, I think it's here to stay. Don't be left behind. At the same time, it's not everyone needs to go out and rush to adopt legal tech. You should be strategic, figure out where it fits into your practice, and go through that analysis of, again, administrative, repetitive, and substantive tasks for every legal transaction. Map it out. It will save you the time. And of course, lastly, just have fun with legal tech, and you're at the right conference for that. Thank you very much.